So I guess when you're creating a narrative for someone else's channel, there is less accountability. So I stumbled across this video from a channel called Lifey, and it seems to be a channel that just basically collects things that are said by people all across the world. So this particular guy is just sort of someone who put this in for this video, presumably. And he has tried his hardest to sound like an expert. That's my take on it. And tried to give his impression of what is so very different about Australia compared to America. The thing is, I'm not sure that he was in Australia for very long. I'm not sure that he actually travelled very far in Australia. And I just think that he must have had some kind of limited experiences. You'll see what I mean as we look at this video.
The food's really good. One thing I would say to avoid is durian fruit. It's a giant, like, brown, spiky ball. It's really hard. Don't get it.
Of course, the good news on that one is that you're going to find that in most areas in Australia, if you went in and asked for durian, people are going to look at you blankly and go, "What the heck is that?" I'm thinking it's possibly something that you get far north, maybe, northern Queensland, Northern Territory, but it's not something I've ever come across, and I can reassure people it's not really something that you would consider Australian food, because, like I said, it is obviously, if it is a very regional thing. You're not going to find it down here in Victoria, for starters. Maybe New South Wales, I don't know, maybe people can tell me that, but certainly it's not something you're going to find in southern states. I've never even heard of it.
Or eat it. It's a bad idea. Mangoes are really good. I had this thing called bitter melon. I don't know. Why do you eat that? I don't know.
Okay, I will agree, mangoes are definitely one of the best fruits around. And that definitely makes me think that he is talking about an experience in the far north of Australia, because even though we can get mangoes and everything down south, they are certainly a tropical fruit. And when he's talking about bitter melon and durian, then I think, yeah, it must be like somewhere in the north. I've also never heard of bitter melon, and for anyone overseas who's watching this, I can assure you, you don't have to eat bitter melon. You're probably not going to find it in most supermarkets, at least not in the southern part of Australia. I've never come across it. We do have some actually really yummy fruit here, so you don't have to eat these random things that I've never heard of.
Watch out for the bean ice cream.
I'm thinking he's probably referring to vanilla bean ice cream, which is a dairy-free ice cream, which is hardly something that Australians eat on a regular basis. So I just find it really interesting that the things that he's mentioning are things that a majority of Australians don't eat on a daily basis, or even at all for some of them.
I don't know why they thought that was a good idea. But Korean ice cream, that's good. And it's really cheap too.
As opposed to regular ice cream that you can buy anywhere in Australia. I find it really bizarre what he's saying here in terms of these are things that he's saying are Australian foods, giving the impression that this is what we eat on a regular basis. The only thing out of that entire list that I eat whenever I can, in other words, whenever it is affordable down here in Victoria, is mango. And usually that's only, part way through the season, because for the rest of the year, for starters, if they are down here, then they're ones that have been in cold storage for some time and they're probably a bit woody. But, other than that, they are not cheap down in southern parts of Australia because we don't grow them down here. But the other things he mentioned, they're not actually what you would consider as Australian foods.
In Australia, there's a lot of words that are different. Fair dinkum, I don't really know what it means.
Okay, first of all, here's my suggestion for anyone from overseas who is coming to Australia. Don't be afraid to ask us what the F we're talking about when we start using colloquialisms like fair dinkum. We're pretty friendly people. We might take the mickey out of you occasionally, but if you want to know what it is we're saying, we're more than happy to explain ourselves. Okay, fair dinkum, for anyone who's not Australian, is essentially you're saying, well, I'm telling you the truth. And usually it comes from something where you've said something that sounds like it could almost be unbelievable. So something that's just a little bit more than just your everyday narrative. So you're basically saying fair dinkum to try and tell people you're not exaggerating, you're telling the honest to goodness truth. And of course, conversely, people will use it as a question. So you might tell someone something that sounds kind of amazing and they'll go, fair dinkum? They're asking you a question. Are you actually telling me the truth or are you pulling my leg? So it's not that hard, really, to pick up, I guess. But I guess this guy possibly was a little bit uncertain about asking people to clarify what they were saying.
But they use it all over the place. I don't really know. I don't know what that means. Dinky D, I don't really know what that is either.
Honestly, you could use this video as the basis for some sort of comedy routine. I'm not good at coming up with comedy routines, so I would suck at it, but I can imagine someone doing that. Okay, for if you're not Australian, Dinky D, it's similar in meaning, but it also has that connotation of if you're Dinky D, you kind of really, you're legitimate, you're for real, you know, you're on the level, you're telling the truth. But there is also sometimes it can be used to say Dinky D as in, yeah, they're legitimate Aussies. So, you know, if we're talking about meat pies, yeah, they're Dinky D Aussie food. They're real Aussie food. Although, you know, Kiwis might have something to say about that also. But, yeah, that's my interpretation. That's the way I've always interpreted. But of course, it's going to be a regional thing. I'd imagine that other people may have slightly different translations of Dinky D. But to me, it is either A, yeah, you're just being truthful, you're being honest, or B, Dinky D, meaning that it is a real legit Aussie kind of thing.
The boot and the bonnet, so that's for your car. So your trunk is called the boot, and then the hood is called the bonnet. The countertop is called the bench. Elevators are a lift. Trash is the bin.
Okay, someone help me out on this. Saying that trash is the bin, I'm not sure if that is entirely correct, because I thought that in terms of if you're talking about a bin, then Americans would call it a trash can. But if they're talking about trash, then they're talking about rubbish. What are other people's thoughts on this?
If you want the trick to speaking with an Aussie accent, all you have to do is add an R to the end of anything that sounds or ends in an O. So instead of no, he's like no.
And this is the reason why when you see people on American television shows or on American movies, that 9 times out of 10, the only time you're ever going to hear an accent that actually sounds like an Australian accent is because they've employed an Australian actor or actress.
Just like that, okay. So and you can listen for it, you'll hear the hidden R in there. But it's interesting because every other word that has an R actually written in it, then they don't pronounce that. So I don't know what's going on there. Okay, Kiwis are fun. So they're from New Zealand, and they have their own little accent. It's lower, less nasally. You just say bro a lot. It's like, bro, I need some water, bro. So that's Kiwi.
Does anyone want to take a guess at how many Kiwis this guy has actually met? Because I'm thinking that you could probably count them on one hand. I'm thinking he has come across someone in Australia who is a Kiwi, who is from a region where bro gets used a bit, and this person has used it a lot. Um, oh my gosh, sorry, this is just mind blowing that someone thinks that you can speak like a Kiwi if you just speak like normally, but then add bro on the end. I'm not going to like go into an explanation of the difference between Kiwi and Australian accents here because that's not what this is about. But this is just mind blowing to me. To the best of my knowledge, I mean, maybe this guy went to New Zealand and maybe everyone in New Zealand has suddenly started speaking this way, and I'm just unaware of this. But it's crazy.
When you see someone on the street, you just say, "Hi, go, mate." It's "How are you going, mate?" We just say, "Hi, go, mate." Kind of like one little sound there. So that's kind of fun. "Hi, go, mate." Yeah, just kind of get it up in the nose. Say, "Fair income. Shall be right. No worries."
Okay, I try to be kind usually, but this guy is just really, really ticking me off. Let's talk about regional accents. Now, I would not describe myself as having a nasal accent. And I realise that when you go to some northern parts of Australia, that the Aussie accent there is far more ochre than what you get from people from Victoria or from Tasmania. I know I've been told by some people that having a Tasmanian accent makes me sound a bit stuck up, but then that's regional in various areas of Tasmania too. You go to some suburbs in Tasmania and they speak like complete utter bogans. So it is all very, very regional. That would be me trying to tell people that everyone in America speaks like a Texan with that slow Texan drawl, and I'm not going to try and imitate it. So I get frustrated when people think that they've been in Australia for a few weeks and they think that they are suddenly a linguistic expert. Okay, he had a fair go, but yeah.
So there's a lot of really cool animals in Australia. Wombats are pretty cool. They're kind of like a cross between a gerbil and a dog.
Isn't a gerbil a kind of rodent? Like a rat, roughly the size of your hand? Because I wouldn't exactly consider a wombat as being a cross between a gerbil and a dog. They're kind of more like a brick, really.
And then there's koalas. They have the Royal Botanical Gardens. There are really big bats. The flying fox, I think, is what they're called. So they're pretty big. They're fruit bats. And they just kind of roost in the trees there.
Now, there's a major misconception going on here, and I know that there's a lot of Australians who also perhaps misunderstand. But flying foxes aren't actual bats. They're mammals. They are an entirely different species from bats. Yeah, they have the wings that look like bat wings, but they're not bats. I think I would describe them as hanging in the trees, not roosting in the trees, because my impression of roosting is that they're actually sitting up there upright, whereas they do literally hang like bats.
The birds are pretty exotic looking. The cockatoo is, if you're not familiar with it, it's just a white bird and has like the little yellow head thing, but it makes a really annoying sound, and it like serves as an alarm clock sometimes, which was not nice.
I think raucous is a good term when you describe the way that cockatoos sound a lot of the time. And it's something that Australians hate, but a lot of tourists hate as well. And I've seen some hilarious reactions of people visiting Australia who hear cockatoos for the first time and are just like, what the heck was that?
There are lorikeets, which are like rainbow kind of colored birds, and they're just like flying around. We would feed the birds, the cockatoos, and slowly we like got them more comfortable with us. So first they would just like, we'd put bread out on the window, and then they'd come and eat the bread. Soon we started like making them work for it a little bit. So like we made them come in a little bit. After a while, then we like basically trained them, and they'd come on our arms, they'd go on our back, on our head. Although we realized that there was a problem eventually, because we went a couple days without feeding them, and every morning the birds would come to our window and start tapping on the window because they wanted to get fed.
Oh, no wonder he was being woken up by the sound of cockatoos. They obviously decided that was a nice place to hang out. Honestly, it bugs me when people come from overseas and feed our native wildlife and our native birds. For starters, feeding bread to cockatoos is just bad. But not only that, you don't want them to be getting on your arm or on your shoulder or whatever. Cockatoos can actually become quite aggressive, and if it thinks it's got food, it may well peck at you, and trust me, those things can give a really nasty bite if they feel the need to. So yeah, if you're from overseas visiting Australia, or even if you're Australian, just don't feed unless you've gone out and you've bought proper native bird seed and you have a feeder outside of your window and you're not trying to feed from your hand, they're not squirrels, then just don't.
So that was pretty fun. Of course, there are kangaroos. What we usually did was we went to like, there's a ton of like nature reserves or whatever, and so you can go to those and pet the kangaroos and feed them and stuff. I spent my summers in the suburbs, and it was very hot, 40 degrees Celsius. So that's probably like 110 or something. I think it got down to freezing like once. I don't remember any severe storms or anything like that. So pretty safe and nice weather.
Okay, so it sounds like he was quite possibly, almost certainly in the north. Interesting that he's saying that he didn't encounter any severe storms. I'm not sure whether he's just comparing that to like tornadoes that you would get in the USA, because you still get some pretty decent summer storms in Australia. Maybe he just wasn't here for long enough to experience some of those really decent summer storms.
There are some fun like Aussie Holidays, Australia Day, which is in January. It's summer there, so going to the beach is pretty typical. You go to the beach for Australia Day and have a barbecue, which is nice. They also have Anzac Day. I can't remember if it was like World War II or something. It's a war memorial.
World War One, and if you're Australian, you know that. But look, here's the thing that gets my goat. If you're visiting a country and you're aware of, public holidays or days that are publicly recognised, then don't just brush them off with like a really blasé tone. If you don't know what they're about, ask a local, get someone to explain to you what they're about. Or if you don't want to talk to the locals, go on the internet and do a bit of research. Don't just come on a YouTube video and just brush it off as, oh, well, Anzac Day, it's like, one of those memorial days, World War One or World War Two, kind of, oh, whatever. Because it is really disrespectful to the country that you are talking about.
One of their traditions is they have Anzac biscuits or cookies. They call cookies biscuits. And they're really, really hard, but they taste pretty good. You have to watch out when you're biting them because you might injure yourself.
Okay, I'm thinking this is coming from someone who is used to a culture of these sort of really soft, squishy kind of cookies that they have in the USA. That this is me just guessing, because obviously I've not been to the USA, but I'm thinking that they're perhaps not as used to really, really hard biscuits like Anzacs. But then that said, I mean, they're not a great deal harder than like your Oreos or stuff like that, I guess. But look, you know, if you're American and you want to try Anzacs and you find them a little bit hard, dip them in your tea or coffee. That still works.
The culture of the entire country, everyone's really laid back, pretty chill, and very accepting of everyone. So that was really, really a cool thing. So it's really a neat place to go.
Now, I will say, while he did come across as being perhaps a little bit clueless, I didn't see anything in what he was saying as coming across in a negative manner. He wasn't doing that annoying thing that some Americans do and trying to compare Australia with America and then saying that it falls flat because it's not like America. He was talking about the things that to him were different and took a little bit of adjustment, but even then he was not doing it in a negative way. So kudos to this guy for sharing his thoughts, even though he kind of missed the point a bit here and there. But it wasn't a bad go at having a look at some of the differences between Australia and America. This video is actually going to be in two parts because I've just realised that the original video has two different people giving their opinions about Australia. So it seems logical to stop here and do a separate video looking at the other guy who spoke on this video. So thanks for watching. If you're not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. I'm trying to get up over that 1,000 subscriber mark. Also, if you like my content, hit the like button and leave a comment below. What are your thoughts on some of the things that have been talked about in this video?